She betrayed everyone. The phrase reverberated around the courtroom like a gunshot, bouncing off the high ceilings and waxed oak walls. For an instant, it seemed as if time had been held in abeyance. Each head swiveled rapidly to confront the young woman in the dock, and the low buzzing that had been building for weeks detonated into a rumbling roar. Emma Hayes, not much past her late 20s, sat rigid, her palms dripping with sweat as she clutched the arms of the chair. Her heart thudded angrily, every beat sounding louder than the previous one. She had been charged with stealing millions from the Hayes family wealth, a deed she didn't do, a deceit she never thought she would be suspected of. The courtroom seemed to be a stifling, thick with tension, weighed down with accusation. Reporters and cameras and curious onlookers crowded the available space, their gaze on her, some filled with sympathy, others with the silent judgment. The rumors of treachery had spread more swiftly than truth itself could travel, making her out to be the antagonist in a tale she had yet to author. Emma's mind ran wildly, trying to think of words to protect herself, of proof to establish her innocence, but at the moment, she was still trapped in the tempest. The judge, a hard man with years of experience stamped on the lines of his face, brought his gavel down with such force that it shook the room. "Order in the court," he insisted, his tone firm but laced with the tone of exhaustion, as if he had witnessed this spectacle too many times. Even his commanding voice, though authoritative, could not completely suppress the buzz, the muffled gasps, and the whispers that had been circulating for months, the betrayal, the pilfered trust, the destruction of a family fortune. Emma swallowed hard, her mouth dry, and attempted to concentrate. She was aware of the truth that might dismantle it all, not only her own existence, but that of every person in the room. It was a secret so well buried, so well concealed, that its unearthing might ruin people she had loved, even her own relatives. And yet it must be revealed today, regardless of the price. The prosecutor, piercing-eyed and unrelenting, hunched forward over his desk, his eyes nailed to Emma like a predator spotting its quarry. "Your Honor," he commenced, voice heavy with accusation, "the case is evident. The defendant falsified financial records, wired millions illegally, and connived this breach of confidence against her family. She alone is guilty of the destruction that has rocked the Hayes family to its foundation." The courtroom erupted in a collective gasp. Emma's stomach plummeted, the room wavering precariously as if the walls themselves were closing in around her. The documents on the prosecutor's table were tidily arranged: ledgers, bank records, screenshots, and signed certificates. Every page was a knife aimed at her, silently accusing. To the naked eye, it was an impenetrable case. To anyone observing the tale being spun out, Emma looked guilty, but she knew better. Those pages had been deliberately tampered with. Someone had created the transfers, forged the signatures, and planted the evidence, all to frame her as the scapegoat. She had found out the true perpetrator weeks ago, behind the soothing guise of loyalty and family ties. And now, in public, she was being accused of committing a crime that wasn't hers. Her attorney, a level-headed man named Daniel Rhodes, put a reassuring hand on her arm. "Breathe, Emma," he whispered softly. "We have a plan. The truth will come out. Just trust me." Emma nodded, though it did little to calm shaking hands. Daniel had been her pillar of support during this ordeal, working his way through stacks of forged documents, late-night strategy meetings, and hours upon hours of preparation. He realized that the stakes were high. If they lost, not only Emma would go to prison, but the reputation of her family could be forever destroyed. The jury shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some glanced at each other, questioning silently the validity of the documents. Others wrote down frantic notes, attempting to document every morsel. Emma's mind whirled, remembering each email she had found, every questionable transaction she had tracked down, and every lie that had been used to incriminate her. She longed to be able to reach through the courtroom and present to them the true story, the one that told a different tale altogether. The prosecutor went on, his voice more strident, nearly dramatic, as if for the benefit of cameras in the gallery. The evidence is overwhelming. Several transactions amounting to more than $2 million were transferred from corporate accounts to private accounts managed by the defendant. She had access, she had knowledge, and she had intent to commit this offense. And let the record be clear, Your Honor. The reputation of the family has been destroyed. Emma seethed with anger and frustration. She wanted to scream, to yell at the unfairness of it all, but she stayed quiet. The courtroom was a tinderbox, each moment charged with anticipation and suspicion. Outside the court, the press had already manipulated the story into a scandal, coloring headlines that would dog her for the remainder of her life. She heard the reverberation of traitor and betrayal ringing inside her head like a sadistic tune. Her father, sitting in the front row, gazed at her with a combination of sadness and bewilderment. He had always trusted her utterly, but the proof had shaken even him. Emma wished to reach out and touch his hand, to tell him that she was not guilty, but she didn't have the nerve. Verbal assurances would never suffice. Evidence was required, and evidence, true, irrefutable evidence, was arriving, though she didn't know precisely when or how. A stunned silence dropped over the courtroom as the judge rocked back in his chair, his fingers steepled contemplatively. "Miss Hayes," he spoke slowly, "you can make your case when it is called. But let me make one thing clear. This court takes allegations of this sort very seriously. The penalties of lying here are steep." Emma nodded her dry mouth, but a spark of determination ignited in her breast. She had met so many challenges in the past, but this one was different from all others. The burden of injustice weighed on her shoulders and threatened to crush her will. Yet, beneath the terror and quivering, there smoldered a small flame of defiance. She would not let herself be consumed by deceptions. The prosecutor set the last document on the table with a resounding thud. "Your Honor, I present to the court this evidence, A through Z. It is complete, comprehensive, and damning. The defendant's guilt is unquestionable." Emma's eyes dropped to the ground. For a fleeting instant she questioned whether she would ever be believed. She considered the true offender, someone clever, devious, and close enough that they could take advantage of her trust. That individual had planned all of this out with such detail, using her as the ultimate front so they could slip away undetected. But she had discovered the fissures, the smallest errors, the minute details that would ultimately be their downfall. Her attorney nodded ever so slightly, a signal that it was time. Emma took a deep breath and let the tension in the courtroom wash over her. Let it energize her with courage. She would weather the storm, respond to every charge, and get ready to unleash the buried truth. Justice, however late, would battle back today. And in her heart, Emma understood one thing for sure. The courtroom, once the domain of judgment and accusation, was soon to be the platform of a revelation that would leave all who witnessed it stunned and rewrite the drama of betrayal, lies, and the battle for truth. Emma's hands were still shaking, but she bullied herself into sitting up straight, attempting to conceal the terror that threatened to engulf her. The courtroom was a pressure cooker, each look from the jury and onlookers ratcheting up the pressure on her shoulders. She could hear the thudding of her own heartbeat in her ear, a deafening drum ticking down the seconds, until her destiny would be sealed. Her attorney, Daniel, bent in close, speaking in a low-toned precision that didn't match the tempest raging outside. "Emma, you have to stay focused. The truth is our ally. One shot, that's all we get to turn this around. Recall everything we rehearsed." Emma nodded wordlessly, swallowing. She believed Daniel, but the terror of failure was overwhelming. A single mistake might land her in jail for something she didn't do. The prosecutor, reading her uncertainty, pushed on with fervor. "Your Honor, the defendant has had every chance to make herself clear, and all she has to say are excuses. The books are clear as day. Millions have vanished, and the evidence all leads back to her." His tone was self-assured, a predator savoring the trapped prey before him. All of the jurors had leaned in, the weight of his conviction bearing down on Emma. Abruptly, the doors to the courtroom burst open with a sudden snap, every head turning in the direction of the rear. A dark-clad man slipped in and strode purposefully through the ranks of onlookers. He had a sealed envelope in his hand, the surface covered with a red wax seal that glowed with an inner light beneath the courtroom lamps. Emma's heart raced. She didn't know him, but there was something in his presence that felt charged, as if the course of the trial was about to change. The judge narrowed his eyes as the man stepped up to the bench and passed the envelope over. "What is this?" the judge inquired, his voice firm but with a hint of curiosity. The courtroom dropped suddenly silent, the air thick with anticipation as heavy as stone. Every whisper ceased. Every camera lens focused on the envelope as if it held the destiny of all who stood before it. With careful intent, the judge broke the seal and started to scan the contents. The prosecutor's confident face puckered, ever so slightly, as he saw the judge's furrowed brow. Murmurs started to spread through the jury and onlookers. Emma's eyes widened as she caught flashes of photographs, bank statements, and emails pouring from the envelope. Her hands involuntarily gripped the arm of her chair. This was the proof that she had waited for, the confirmation that someone else had planned the whole thing to set her up. Daniel leaned forward again, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is it, Emma. The truth is finally coming out. Remain calm." She nodded, but adrenaline rushed through her. Her thoughts flashed back over all that she had discovered. The shady financial transactions, the cooked books, the clandestine meetings she had witnessed. It all fit together so neatly with what was in the envelope in front of the judge. The jurors fidgeted restlessly in their seats. Some stared hard at the papers. Others glanced nervously at each other, attempting to grasp the dramatic change that had occurred. Even the prosecutor seemed discomfited now, having to re-examine the story he had been convinced of only seconds before. Emma could almost hear the wheels in their heads spinning. The fact that maybe she wasn't the criminal they had been conditioned to think she was. Daniel rose, speaking to the court in measured tones. "Your Honor, the testimony just offered verifies what we've said all along. The defendant is innocent of these offenses. Another one with access and motive has carefully tried to set her up. We aim to lay this evidence out and reveal the truth." His tone was firm, assured, slicing through the courtroom anxiety like a knife. The prosecutor's mouth opened, but nothing came out. His carefully crafted plan, his rock-solid case, had just been rocked to its very foundation. The room was a blend of incredulity, curiosity, and growing suspense. The audience leaned in, sensing that the trial was no longer a cut-and-dried issue of guilt or innocence. It had now become one of guile, treachery, and secrets about to be revealed. Emma experienced a curious combination of relief and apprehension. Relief for the truth had finally gained a chink in the carapace of lies. Apprehension, for the stakes were now even higher. Whoever had orchestrated her setup was desperate, reckless, and still at large. And now that the evidence lay open, they might do even more desperate things to cover themselves. The judge, scanning the papers attentively, spoke at last. "This alters the court's viewpoint. I will permit the defense to make their entire case about this new evidence. Everyone must move with total openness." His tone had authority, but there was an edge of anticipation, as if even he could feel the dramatic disclosures soon to come. Emma exhaled slowly, feeling her heart rate gradually settle, though the tension still lingered like static electricity in the air. She looked at Daniel, who gave her a reassuring nod. The real challenge was just beginning. They had uncovered the evidence, but convincing everyone, her family, the jury, the court, would require careful presentation and unwavering courage. Outside, the courtroom cameras recorded every detail, and the whispers of journalists quickly broadcast the news. Sensational turn in the Hayes family embezzlement case. New evidence surfaces. Headlines would bellow betrayal and intrigue. But Emma knew the story behind the headlines, the one no one else comprehended. She had been innocent all along, and now the relentless clock of justice had started ticking in her direction. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, charged with anticipation. Emma's life, her family's reputation, and the unveiling of secrets weighed in the balance. One misplaced word, one miscalculation, and it all fell apart. Yet Emma harbored a glimmer of resolve. The truth would at last be exposed, and she was determined to battle for justice however long it lasted or how perilous the road would prove. As the session recessed briefly, Emma sat back in her chair, her hands at last still. She knew that what happened next would determine everything. The evidence had pushed open a door, but stepping through it, revealing the perpetrator, and exonerating herself would take bravery, tactics, and a readiness to deal with the treachery that had threatened to kill her. The clock ticking was no longer a metaphor anymore. Time was passing, tension was increasing, and each and every second pushed them closer to a revelation that could destroy lives and reshape the history of the Hayes family forever. The courtroom grew silent again, as the judge beckoned in the next witness. Emma's heart pounded like a drum in her chest. This was it, the moment that could tip the jury utterly, the testimony that could affirm her innocence or fortify the lie against her. She took a deep breath and attempted to calm the shaking of her hands. Her older brother Ryan Hayes stepped up to the stand. Each step he made weighed upon him, as though the burden of years of unspoken words bore down upon him. The jury sat with bated breath, the audience held its collective breath, and even the prosecutor sat fidgeting. Ryan was always the rock of the family, practical, honest, and unshakable. And now doubt filled his eyes, betraying inner turmoil that ravaged him. The judge gestured for him to begin. "State your name and your relation to the defendant," he said. "Ryan Hayes, I'm Emma's brother," he said, his voice low, tight with emotion. He glanced at Emma, and for a fleeting moment, a flash of doubt crossed his face. The courtroom felt like it had stopped breathing. Ryan's voice shook as he went on. I don't know. Emma, we trusted you. We all did. And now, all of this," his words broke off at a loss, as he waved toward the prosecutor's evidence. "The accusations, the money. It's unbelievable." But his eyes dropped, pain and confusion struggling inside of him. Emma's chest constricted. She yearned to leap towards him, to take his hand and tell him the truth. But she did not move from her chair. Words were not enough to convince anyone in this room. Evidence was required, and they possessed it now. The enigmatic envelope, the pictures and the emails that would rip apart the fabrications that had been woven around her. Her attorney Daniel stood, his gaze fixed on Ryan. "Ryan, I know this is hard, but please, recall what you saw, what you know. Consider the facts and not merely the appearances." Slowly Ryan nodded, attempting to compose himself. He paused, took a breath, and went on, describing what he had seen over the last months. The suspicious transfers, the clandestine meetings, the odd behavior of one they had all trusted. I didn't know at first," he confessed, his voice shaking. "I didn't want to believe that any member of the family could betray us. But the more I dug, the clearer it became. Someone framed Emma, and it wasn't her." Gasps filled the courtroom. The jury gave each other shocked looks. Even the prosecutor's smug grin began to falter as he took notes, having to reconcile this new turn of events. A spark of hope flared to life in Emma's chest. Her brother, the person whose opinion mattered most, was now starting to get it. Daniel grasped the moment, leaning forward. "Your Honor, if I may, evidence my client presented, in addition to Ryan Hayes' testimony, confirms that she couldn't possibly have committed these crimes. The real perpetrator is a person with access, opportunity, and motive. But it is not Emma." The judge nodded, motioning for restraint, but his expression showed increasing interest. "Continue the presentation of this evidence," he stated, his voice restrained but authoritative. Emma's heart pounded as the prosecution laid out meticulous evidence. Emails of faked communications, doctored bank transfers, and papers meticulously forged. Each item of evidence stacked another level of clarity, gradually unwinding the complex web of deceit. All the jurors leaned forward, enthralled by the cumulative case against him. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, like electrical charges crackling in the air. The prosecutor stood up again, though this time in a softer voice, less confident. "Objection, Your Honor. Though there has been new evidence submitted, it does not yet establish the defendant's innocence." He didn't finish as the judge held up a hand, motioning him to sit down. Emma's eyes welled up with tears, not of fear but frustration and relief. She had been silenced for so long, falsely accused, but now finally the pieces were coming together. Her brother's words, alongside the concrete evidence, were making it a turning point. The courtroom was charged with tension. All eyes were on her, on Ryan, and on the papers that had the potential to turn the entire trial around. Journalists wrote frantically. The tension was even felt through the television cameras that telecasted the trial live. Emma had a sense of nervousness as well as resolve running through her veins. And then finally Ryan talked once more, his voice stronger than before. "I've reviewed the evidence. I've seen the truth. Emma did not betray this family. I was mistaken to doubt her. And I'm sorry." His eyes met hers, and for a moment she felt a surge of vindication, the courage to keep fighting for justice. The jury remained in strained silence, grappling with the emotional evidence. Some whispered among themselves. Others gazed at the evidence in shock. The strength of truth, and sincere testimony, was now shifting momentum. Emma understood it was just the start. There were secrets to reveal, untruths to unearth, and the genuine perpetrator to find justice. But for the first time there was a spark of hope. The judge concluded the session with a momentary recess. Emma sat back in her chair, spent but determined. The cathartic testimony had cracked the door, but opening it and fully exposing the secret betrayal would take courage, strategy, and unyielding determination. Outside, the TV cameras flashed, recording every detail, every tear, every look. Headlines would blare about family drama, shocking testimony, and courtroom bombshells. But Emma knew the real story behind the show, the real story that counted, the secret truth yet to surface in the next hearing. The tension was heavy in the air. The crowd, both inside the courtroom and at home watching on television, could sense it. The trial was well from its conclusion, and the most surprising revelations were yet to come. The courtroom had hardly shaken off the emotional outburst of testimony when the doors burst open with a loud, jarring creak. Heads snapped around automatically. Someone entered whom no one had expected. The atmosphere changed, charged with such thick tension that it seemed almost like static. Cameras clicked wildly as murmurs circulated through the room. It was the family accountant, Mr. Leonard Briggs, a soft-spoken, unobtrusive man who had always kept in the shadows, trusting, dependable, unseen, until today. He came towards the bench, with tentative but resolute steps. "Your Honor," he started, his tone firm but desperate. "I've held my tongue too long because I was afraid, but I can no longer sit here and see an innocent person charged, while the real perpetrator roams free." Emma Hayes did not commit these acts. The courtroom burst into whispers. The prosecutor's self-assured stance wavered as he pushed his glasses back onto the bridge of his nose, his lips compressing. Emma's father sat forward, incredulity creasing his face. Ryan's mouth hung open. Even the judge's stern brow arched in guarded interest. Mr. Briggs went on. "I have the documents, the testimony, and company correspondence. They show that the individual who carried out the embezzlement and the attempted setup of Emma, an individual within the family." His gaze swept across the courtroom and fell upon a well-known face seated in the gallery. Gasps and muffled cries erupted at once. All eyes were fixed on the accused, a member of the accused man's family, who had always presented as a loyal person everyone trusted without question. The atmosphere was charged, Emma's heart racing in her chest. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment when the complex web of deceit would come crashing down. The prosecutor, at loss for words, attempted to compose herself. "Objection. Your Honor, this evidence is circumstantial." The judge raised a hand, stopping him in his tracks with a single authoritative motion. "Continue. The court is ready to hear the complete testimony." Mr. Briggs offered proof with care, financial documents in minute detail, emails to serve as evidence of clandestine correspondence, and photos of furtive meetings. The room was entranced, each one's eyes glued to the drama as it unfolded. The plotting, the subterfuge, the betrayal, it all fell into place. Horrifyingly so. Emma had been arranged, being used as a fall guy for the true culprit. The jurors leaned in, taking it all in. Some hugged their notebooks to their chest. Others gazed in shock. Even the media team, professionalized to anticipate scandal, were tongue-tied, their cameras capturing the seriousness of the discovery. Emma's chest pounded. Relief, vindication, and lingering terror swept over her. She was finally vindicated. But danger had not passed. The perpetrator still sat in the courtroom, and the revelation of their crimes could lead to desperate responses. The tension was almost intolerable. Daniel, her attorney, moved forward, speaking directly to the judge and jury with calculated confidence. Your Honor, the proof now clearly shows that the defendant, Emma Hayes, is innocent. Whoever was responsible for these manipulations worked alone, with access and motive, and has covered it up carefully. We stand ready to bring forth irrefutable evidence in order that justice might be served. The prosecutor, noticing his earlier confidence coming unraveled, attempted to salvage the case. Your Honor, though new evidence has emerged, the intent and opportunity of the defendant remain to be taken into account. The judge held up a hand, his voice firm and authoritative. Enough. The court acknowledges the weight of this new testimony and the corroborating evidence. The trial will continue with full regard for these revelations. There was a stifling silence that filled the courtroom. Each individual was aware of the seriousness of the situation. Emma's family was seated with their faces frozen, between shock, relief, and betrayal. The true offender, with the mask now slipping, attempted to play cool, but the cracks were visible, the facade of innocence crumbling against the pressure of irrefutable fact. Emma gazed at her brother, Ryan, who nodded sharply, his determination evident. She smiled back at him, a glimmer of hope and newfound strength in her eyes. The storm was not yet over, but the tide had shifted. The concealed reality had started to surface, and the actual culprit would be brought to account for their wrongdoings. The television cameras picked up every look, every expression, transmitting the news to the world. Out on the sidewalk, the public would soon discover that this was not just any courtroom drama. It was a tale of deceit, manipulation, and the victory of truth over lies. As the judge requested a short recess, Emma breathed out deeply, letting the burden of anticipation finally start to turn. The letter of secrets had been torn open, and the pieces were falling into position. But the ultimate struggle, the triumphant instant of justice, remained to be had. The courtroom had been transformed into a theater of truth, and Emma stood prepared to confront whatever was to come. The courtroom was still, the atmosphere heavy with expectation. Each and every individual in the room felt the tension, so palpable it seemed the world itself had stopped to see what was going to occur next. Emma Hayes was seated in the defendant's chair, her hands damp, but her body upright. Weeks of accusation, betrayal, and doubt were finally coming to a close. The jury returned to the courtroom, faces serious, eyes guarded. The foreman rose, hands shaking with the verdict. The gravity of the moment weighed heavily upon all, the families, the prosecutor, the media, and the observers. Emma's heart pounded as she looked at her brother Ryan, who gave her an encouraging nod. Daniel, her attorney, leaned in a little, eyes urging her on. At last the foreman's voice came out, firm but weighed down by the gravity of it all. We find the defendant not guilty. The words struck Emma like a tidal wave. Relief and shock washed over her. Tears formed in her eyes as she saw the nightmare end. She was vindicated. Innocent. Her name cleared. Her family, even if shaken by what had occurred, came to appreciate the severity of the betrayal she had suffered. Gasps and whispers filled the courtroom as the actual perpetrator was led in by court officials. The former beloved family member, who had masterminded the embezzlement, now stood before the forces of justice. Their well-made pretense of fidelity had broken down, and greed, dishonesty, and manipulation were exposed. The courtroom, which had been filled with suspicion about Emma, now witnessed the complete disclosure of truth. Emma's father, who was in the front row, rose slowly, his eyes brimming with tears. He hugged her tightly after the ceremony. "I should have known," he whispered, his voice heavy with emotion. "I should have trusted you from the start. I'm so proud of your strength." Ryan hugged them both, putting an arm around his father and sister. "You held on, Emma. You never gave up. Not even when it seemed like it was hopeless." Today justice has finally been served. The judge, sitting at the proceedings with measured calm and firm authority, spoke to the courtroom one last time. "Let this case serve as a reminder that truth, however concealed, has a way of emerging into the light. Justice must always prevail, and deceit, however cleverly concealed, will never escape detection. The prosecutor, now still, could only incline her head. The courtroom cameras recorded every second. The relief, the tears, the vindication. Outside, headlines would howl the tale of betrayal, deception, and final redemption. But for Emma, the greatest prize wasn't the media coverage or the public spectacle. It was the clearing of her name, the recovery of her life, and the knowledge that she had overcome impossible odds and won. As Emma left the courtroom, the sun broke upon her face, a symbolic contrast to the dark storm that had sought to engulf her. She took a deep breath, feeling part exhaustion, part relief, and part empowerment. The truth had triumphed, the lies were laid bare, and justice, though long delayed, had eventually prevailed. She glanced back for the final time at the courthouse, the site of so much anxiety, fear, and disclosure. It was a battleground, but now it stood as a testament to courage, endurance, and unrelenting search for truth. Emma understood that life would never be the same. The wounds of betrayal would remain, but so too would the resilience she had found in herself. The Hayes family's saga, once tainted with betrayal and suspicion, had been rewritten. Betrayal had been met head-on, deception had been revealed, and justice had won out. Emma's odyssey, albeit painful, had revealed that even in the bleakest of times, truth would prevail, and those brave enough to stand up for it can emerge stronger, wiser, and unbroken. As the courtroom emptied and the cameras dissolved, Emma strode away with her head held high, a beacon of hope and resilience. Her nightmare was behind her, but the tale, the one of courage, betrayal, and eventual redemption, would speak to anyone who heard it.